Rain worried the panes like fingernails, a steady, patient scratching that never quite became a storm. The dormitory smelled of boiled cabbage and carbolic soap, of damp wool drying badly on the radiators, of children's sleep, open-mouthed, sour, trusting. The beds were lined like graves, each with its thin blanket tucked with strict corners, each with a name that could be replaced and would, in time, be replaced. Tom did not sleep. He lay still until the room's breathing found its rhythm, and the last cough sank back into silence. Then he sat up without a creak of springs, as if the bed had learned not to betray him. He kept his box under the mattress, where hands did not go unless they were desperate. It was a child's box, no bigger than a loaf of bread, its wood rubbed smooth by constant opening. The lid lifted soundlessly. Inside were relics, a spool of blue thread stolen from the sewing basket, a tarnished thimble, a button shaped like a lion's head, a pigeon's feather, 2 pennies bright from being rubbed, a bit of ribbon with a frayed end, and a ring of hair tied with string, taken from a girl who cried too loudly. None of it was valuable. That was the point. The value was what had happened when he decided it belonged to him. He touched each item with a fingertip, and the air seemed to tighten, attentive. The candle on the far table, left there by some sleepy caretaker, gave a small, obedient tremor. Its flame leaned, not toward a draft, but toward Tom, like a creature that knew where power sat. He had learned early that there were rules no one said aloud. Some children were meant to be struck, and some were meant to do the striking. Some were meant to apologize for existing. Tom was not. A boy in the next bed turned in his sleep and mumbled a name, a soft, childish thing, a mother's name perhaps. Tom watched him as if watching a fish. The boy's face was slack with yearning. Tom felt nothing like it. Wanting was weakness. Wanting made you beg, and beggars did not survive. Under Tom's nails, the wood of the box felt warm. He closed the lid and slid it back under the mattress with care. Tomorrow, Mrs. Cole would take him into her office again. Tomorrow, she would look at him with her pinched mouth and her wary eyes and talk about his ways. Tomorrow, there would be questions. There were always questions. Tom's answers were always better. Mrs. Cole's office was smaller than it pretended to be. The desk was too big for the room. It bullied the walls. Papers were stacked in precise towers, as if order could be built high enough to touch the ceiling. Tom was sent to wait in the corridor. He waited exactly as instructed. Hands by his sides, shoulders relaxed, face composed. He listened. The visitor's voice was mild, almost amused, threaded with something like steel under velvet. "You've had difficulty with him." Mrs. Cole did not like being questioned. Tom heard it in the tightness of her breath. "He's..." She paused, the right word refusing her. "Odd, sir? Not right. Many children seem odd to those who have not had the chance to know them." Tom imagined the man's mouth shaping those words. He imagined the man's eyes. There were people who spoke gently as a way of holding knives. "He frightens the others," Mrs. Cole said. "And he knows things. Things he's no business knowing. It's as if..." Her voice dipped to a whisper, the kind adults used when they thought whispers made lies respectable. "As if he can get into your head." Silence, then the mild voice again. "And the matter of the incidents." Mrs. Cole huffed. Paper shifted. "Animals, sir. A rabbit once. And the seaside trip. 2 of them came back half mad, insisting it taken them into a cave, and..." She swallowed. "I can't have that sort of influence here. And yet he can be so polite." Tom's lips almost smiled. Politeness cost him nothing. It bought him time. "And his records?" the man asked. Mrs. Cole made a sound of frustration. "Nothing useful. Mother dead. Father unknown." She gave a name, but... There was the scrape of a drawer, the papery sigh of a file opened. "Merop," she said, as if the name tasted wrong. "Merop Gaunt. Said he was to be Tom after the father, and Marvolo after some relation of hers. Marvolo, strange, foreign sounding. Tom's heart. Release. It did not leap. It simply fixed. A hook found meat. Gaunt. Got. A name like a thin hand around a throat. A name like a blade drawn slowly from a sheath. He waited, perfectly still, as if he had not heard the hinge in the world creak open. When Mrs. Cole finally called him in, Tom entered with the same measured steps he used when he wished to appear harmless. The visitor stood by the window, looking out at the rain as though London were a puzzle he might solve if he stared long enough. He turned. Tom felt the man's attention settle on him with the weight of a hand placed on his shoulder. "Tom Riddle," the man said. Tom did not correct him. Names were negotiable like rules. "My name is Professor Dumbledore," the man went on. "I teach at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "Witchcraft," Tom repeated, tasting the syllables. He watched for a flinch. Adults lied most when they wanted to see if you believed them. Dumbledore's expression did not change. "Yes." Tom's gaze flicked to the man's hands. Long fingers. Clean nails. No ring. No sign of work. A man who did not build things with his body. A man who built with his mind. "I don't believe in magic," Tom said, "because belief was a trap people tried to put around you." Dumbledore smiled slightly. "That is fortunate, because it is not a matter of belief. It is a matter of fact." "Nay?" Tom felt an irritation, sharp as a pinprick. "Prove it." Dumbledore's eyes were bright, too bright for the dim room. "As you like." The wardrobe in the corner trembled. Its door gave a slow, reluctant creak. Tom's stomach tightened. Not with fear, but with proprietary anger. He had taken great care to hide certain things there. They were his. The wardrobe door swung open. A smell of mothballs and old wood breathed out. And then, one by one, objects began to lift into the air as if plucked by invisible strings. A silver snuff box, a child's bracelet, a stolen postcard, a set of marbles. They hovered, turning slowly, catching the thin light. Tom's face remained calm, but inside him something thrilled. Recognition, like a key sliding into a lock. Dumbledore's voice stayed gentle. "You took these from others. They didn't need them," Tom said. He heard the coolness in his own tone and approved of it. "They needed to feel safe," Dumbledore corrected. And the objects drifted down into Tom's waiting hands with the soft clink of judgment. "And you enjoyed making them feel unsafe." Tom held the snuff box. He could lie. He could charm. He could do either easily. But something in Dumbledore's gaze made lying feel like showing your throat. "I can make things happen," Tom admitted. "I can make people do what I want." Dumbledore's smile vanished entirely. "That is precisely why I am here." Tom lifted his chin. "You said you're a teacher. What will you teach me?" "None." Dumbledore studied him a moment longer than politeness required. Then, as if choosing each word from a shelf of dangerous tools, he said, "Control." Tom's fingers tightened around the snuff box until his knuckles paled. "And what about my mother?" he asked, because the hook in his mind had begun to pull. "Her name was Gaunt." Something flickered behind Dumbledore's eyes, quick as candlelight in a draught. "Where did you hear that?" "So it's true," Tom said softly. "Gaunt." Dumbledore did not answer at once. The silence stretched, and within it Tom felt power like a third presence in the room. His Dumbledore's and something older listening through the walls. At last Dumbledore said, "Yes, that was her name." Tom swallowed the satisfaction like medicine. "Who were they?" Dumbledore's gaze sharpened. "A family, an old one, and not a happy one." Tom smiled then, just a little. "Old," he repeated. "That means important." The bricks parted like a mouth obeying a command. Tom watched the hidden street reveal itself, and he did not gasp as other children might have. He stored the sight away, parceling it into pieces he could revisit whenever he wished. Diagon Alley smelled of smoke and spice and damp stone. The rain here seemed thicker, as if even weather had more substance among wizards. Cloaks brushed cloaks, voices rose and fell, owls blinked from cages. Tom walked at Dumbledore's side with the practiced composure of someone who refused to be impressed, but his eyes devoured everything. He noticed the way people glanced at Dumbledore, the subtle widening of eyes, the quick shift of bodies to clear a path. Respect, Tom thought. Fear, too. He wondered which one he preferred. Dumbledore spoke of lists and books and cauldrons. Tom nodded when expected. He did not ask foolish questions. He asked only the ones that mattered. "What is a Gaunt?" he said, as if asking about a kind of animal. Dumbledore paused beside a shop window full of quills. "A surname, Tom. And what does it mean?" "It means," Dumbledore said carefully, "that your mother came from a line that valued blood above kindness." Tom's gaze slid back to the crowd. "Pure blood," he said, testing the term. He had already learned that adults categorized the world so they could pretend they understood it. Dumbledore's mouth tightened. "Yes." Tom felt a warmth bloom under his ribs. He had always known he was different. Now difference had a pedigree. Now it had roots. There was something delicious about that, something that made the orphanage seem even smaller in retrospect, like a cage he had already outgrown. They passed a darker alley mouth where the cobbles turned slicker, the lanterns dimmer. People there wore their suspicion openly, like armor. Dumbledore guided him on, but Tom's head turned, drawn by the shadows as if they whispered his name. "What's there?" Tom asked. "Places you do not need," Dumbledore replied. Tom made a note. What adults said you did not need was almost always what they feared you would want. They bought robes. Tom chose black, of course. Anything else was a costume. They bought books whose titles promised worlds within worlds. In the apothecary, Tom watched a lizard's tail writhe in a jar and felt nothing but curiosity. In the pet shop, he paused by a glass tank of pale snakes. One lifted its head, tongue flickering. Tom leaned closer. The snake's eyes were gold, indifferent. Tom felt, for a heartbeat, a sense of being recognized, like meeting someone who spoke your private language. Dumbledore's hand rested lightly on Tom's shoulder. "Not that," he murmured, as if steering him away from a precipice. Tom did not look up. He did not need to. He had already decided that precipices were useful. Ollivander's was quieter than the rest of the alley, as if sound itself respected what slept inside. Dust lay in the air like a held breath. Boxes towered precariously, each one a promise, each one a secret. The old man who emerged seemed less like a shopkeeper and more like a keeper of bones. His eyes were pale, uncanny, and they slid over Tom with the unsettling familiarity of someone reading a label. "Tom," Dumbledore said, a warning hidden in the kindness of his tone. But Tom was already watching the man. "Ah," the shopkeeper breathed. "Yes, I remember. I wondered when I'd be seeing you." "No." Tom felt a brief flare of irritation. He disliked being anticipated. "You know me?" "I knew your mother's wand," Ollivander said, and the word mother made Tom's face harden. Dragon heartstring, 10¼ inches, swishy. It did things with great feeling, that wand. Great things, and terrible ones, perhaps." Tom's fingers curled. Her name was Gaunt. Ollivander's pale eyes brightened. "Indeed, and before that." He broke off, smiling thinly. "Ah, but we speak of wands." He measured Tom's arms, his fingers, the distance between shoulder and elbow, like a tailor fitting him for violence. Tom stood still, letting the man do it. There was power in allowing someone to think they held control. Wands were placed into his hand one after another. Beech, yew, ash. Each one felt wrong. One made a vase explode. Another sent a shower of sparks that singed Tom's sleeve. Tom did not jump. He did not apologize. At last Ollivander placed a wand into his palm and Tom felt it immediately, like an animal settling, like a bone clicking into place. The wood was dark, polished, smooth. It fit his grip as if it had grown there. A low hum filled the shop. The dust motes in the air swirled. Not chaotically, but in a tightening spiral. The lamps seemed to brighten. For an instant, Tom had the vivid sensation that the room itself leaned toward him, listening. Ollivander's voice was soft, reverent and wary at once. "Holly," he murmured. "And phoenix feather, 13.5 inches, nice and supple." Tom's eyes narrowed. He did not like the word nice. It sounded like pity. Ollivander's smile thinned further. "Curious," he said. "Very curious." "Why?" Tom demanded. "The phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand," Ollivander said, "gave only one other feather. Just one." Dumbledore's gaze snapped to Ollivander. "And that wand," Ollivander finished, almost savoring it, "chose another." Tom looked at Dumbledore and saw, in the smallest tightening around the eyes, something like dread. Tom savored it. He lifted his wand, feeling the hum settle in his bones. "Good," he said. "Then I won't be alone." Tom found the darker alley as easily as if it had been calling him by name. They were meant to be leaving, their parcels stacked, their coins diminished. Dumbledore spoke of trunks and platforms. Tom nodded and walked, and then, at the corner where the lantern light thinned, he stepped slightly aside, drawn toward a shop front that looked like it had been stained by centuries of greed. "Borgin and Burke's." The sign creaked overhead. The window displayed curiosities like teeth, a severed hand that twitched in its case, a cracked mirror that seemed to hold a different kind of darkness, a music box that looked too pretty to be kind. And there, on a square of black velvet, lay a heavy silver locket. It did not shine brightly. It glimmered like moonlight on a blade. Its metal was worked with a serpentine, ornate and confident. Tom's stomach tightened with a sensation that was not quite recognition but something close, like standing on a stair and finding it unexpectedly underfoot. Behind the glass, a man moved in shadow. His face was narrow. His smile was a careful thing, practiced and hungry. Tom watched him watching Tom. The locket's clasp was shaped like a snake's head, mouth slightly open. Tom imagined the cool weight of it against skin. He imagined owning it. He imagined what it might feel like to close his hand around it and know that no one else ever would again. He leaned closer. His breath fogged the glass. The man inside, Burke, tilted his head, interested now, as if scenting money or blood. Tom's fingers lifted without permission, hovering inches from the locket's reflection. The serpent on the locket seemed to shift in the wavering light, and Tom's mind filled with a single silent certainty. Mine. Dumbledore's hand clamped around Tom's forearm, firm enough to hurt. "No," he said quietly, and it was not a request. Tom did not look away from the locket at once. He stared until the desire steadied into something colder, something more durable. Wanting was weakness. Deciding was power. He let Dumbledore pull him back into the brighter press of Diagon Alley. He carried the image of the locket like a stone in his pocket. As they walked, Dumbledore's grip loosened, but his voice stayed tight. "There are objects," he said, "that feed on the person who covets them." Tom's mouth curved faintly. "Then I'll make it feed on someone else." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment as if seeing, not a child, but the shape of a future. Tom looked back without blinking. King's Cross smelled of iron and coal and farewell. Families clustered in messy knots, hands on shoulders, faces bright with pride and worry. Parents kissed foreheads. Siblings teased. Laughter bounced off brick and vanished into the smoke. Tom stood apart, one hand on the handle of his trunk. His new robes were a proper black, not the Orphanage's faded imitation. They sat on him as if he had been born into them. He watched a mother straighten her son's scarf, her fingers lingering as though she could stitch herself into his clothing. Tom felt only contempt for the softness of it, for the assumption that love was a shield. Dumbledore had not come with him to the platform. That too was a lesson. No one escorted you into your future. You took it. Tom moved through the barrier like a knife through cloth, emerging onto the hidden platform with the same lack of hesitation he'd shown when the bricks of Diagon Alley had parted. The train waited, scarlet, steaming, alive with the restless energy of children who had been told they were special and believed it. He found an empty compartment and placed his trunk carefully, as if order might become a weapon. Then he sat, hands folded, and listened to the world. Voices passed in the corridor, talk of houses, of older brothers, of Quidditch. Names floated by, bright and meaningless. Tom stored them anyway. The door slid open. 2 boys stood there, hesitating. "Is this?" one began. Tom looked up, letting his gaze do the work. The boys fell silent under it. He offered the smallest nod, magnanimous. They entered, settling opposite him, watching him out of the corners of their eyes. Tom listened to their breath, their shifting, their fear of offending. He allowed it. "What's your name?" the bolder boy asked finally. "Tom Riddle," Tom said, and felt the lie of it like an ill-fitting coat. Tom was a hand-me-down name from a father he had never met. Riddle was a joke, a question without an answer. The only part that felt true was the middle, the one he did not offer. The boy introduced himself and his companion, names that meant nothing beyond their usefulness. Tom repeated them perfectly. People liked being remembered. Outside, London slid by in soot-streaked blur, and then the city gave way to green, to hedgerows, to distant hills. Tom's reflection appeared in the darkening window, pale face, neat hair, eyes too old. He thought of Mrs. Cole saying Gaunt. He thought of the serpent on the locket. He thought of Dumbledore's momentary dread. And beneath all of it, like a slow drumbeat, he thought, old blood. The train carried him north, deeper into a country that did not know what it was delivering to its own heart. Hogwarts rose from the night like something that had been waiting for centuries to be used again. The lake was black glass under the stars. The castle's windows burned with candlelight, and Tom's first thought was not awe but appraisal. Thick walls, narrow passages, hidden places. A fortress. A place built to keep things in, or keep things out. He sat among other first years in the antechamber off the great hall, listening to their whispers. They spoke of houses as if houses were families. They spoke of courage and cleverness and loyalty. Tom thought of the orphanage and wondered how long it would take for Hogwarts to reveal the truth beneath its pretty words. When the doors opened, warmth rolled over him. The great hall was immense, its ceiling bewitched to show the night sky, its tables crowded with students whose faces flickered in candlelight like a sea of pale masks. At the far end, teachers sat at the high table. The headmaster, a man with a dignified, tired face, watched the new arrivals with the wary patience of someone who had seen too many children become ghosts. And there, among the teachers, sat Dumbledore. His face was composed, but his eyes found Tom at once. The sorting hat waited on its stool, patched and sagging, ridiculous. Tom approached when his name was called, steps steady, chin lifted. He did not glance at the cheering tables. He did not smile. The hat was lowered onto his head. Its brim slipped over his eyes, and darkness closed in. A voice, dry as paper, spoke inside his mind. Another one. Tom did not flinch. He answered silently, sharp and immediate. "I'm listening." The hat's amusement brushed his thoughts like a spider. Plenty of ambition, plenty of resourcefulness, and something else. Something that bites. Tom felt his mouth tighten. He did not like being catalogued. A taste of old magic flickered. Serpents, stone corridors, whispers through pipes. The hat paused, as if sniffing at a scent it recognized. Oh my. Tom leaned into that pause. "You know what I am," he thought. Say it. The hat sighed, almost indulgent. Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that. Tom's thoughts were calm ice. Put me where I belong. The hat's voice turned faintly wary. Better be Slytherin. Applause rose, thudding proud. Green and silver scarves waved. Tom lifted the hat off and walked to the Slytherin table as if he had been returning home. He sat among strangers and felt for the first time something like possession. This castle, these people, this world. Mine, he thought, and the words settled into him like a seed. The Slytherin common room was underwater twilight made into architecture. The windows looked out into the lake, where pale weeds drifted like hair, and the occasional dark shape slid past, slow and uninterested. The light was always greenish, as if the room remembered moss. Tom sat by the fire as others talked around him. He spoke when spoken to, laughed at the right moments, asked questions that made people feel clever for answering. By the end of the first evening, several boys already leaned closer to him than they did to each other, drawn by a confidence that seemed to promise safety. An older student swaggered, boasting of his father's connections at the ministry. Tom listened politely and filed away the name. A girl with sleek hair and careful eyes asked Tom where he was from. London, Tom said, and let the vagueness do its work. A man's voice drifted across the room, rich with indulgence. First year? Tom turned. Professor Slughorn sat in a heavy armchair near the hearth, a large man with a round face that might have been jolly if not for the intelligence in his eyes. He was watching Tom as if Tom were an ingredient to be tested. Yes, Professor, Tom replied. Slughorn's gaze moved over him. Clean robes, calm face, the lack of obvious fear. And what's your name? Tom Riddle. Slughorn's smile widened. Ah, I thought so. I do try to keep an eye on my new snakes, you know. Potential. He tapped his fingers on the arm of his chair. And do you have a family in the wizarding world, Tom? Tom felt the question like a hand probing for a wound. A mother, he said smoothly. She died. Slughorn's expression softened in the way adults thought sympathy should look. How sad. And her name? Dunmay. Tom hesitated just long enough to seem reluctant, not calculating. Merip, he said. Then, softly, Gaunt. It was a test. He watched Slughorn's face with the precision of a knife edge. For a fraction of a second, the professor's eyes widened. Then his smile snapped back into place, too bright, too quick. Gaunt, Slughorn repeated. My dear boy, that is a very old name. Old? Important. Tom let his own smile bloom, modest and grateful. I'd like to learn, he said. Slughorn's chuckle was warm. Oh, you will. You certainly will. No, there is Across the room, the fire popped, sending sparks up into the air like tiny momentary stars. Tom watched them rise and vanish. He did not need Slughorn's affection. He needed what Slughorn represented. Doors opening, names spoken with respect, the world arranging itself around him. And in the water beyond the windows, something large slid past, unseen in the dark. Tom learned quickly that Hogwarts was a machine fed by rules, and rules were always made by people, and people could be bent. The library became his chapel. He went there when others went to the common room to laugh too loudly, to complain about homework, to boast about futures they had inherited without earning. Tom preferred futures taken. Madame Pince watched him as if he were a rat in silk gloves, but she could not forbid him the shelves. He chose his books carefully, histories first, so he could learn the story the world told itself, then biographies, so he could see how people hid their hunger behind noble phrases, then anything that mentioned blood, lineage, old families. He found the Gaunts buried in dry genealogies that smelled of mildew and age. There were footnotes and sneering asides, polite euphemisms for disgrace. Impoverished, unstable, noted for inbreeding. The words were meant to shame. They only sharpened Tom's interest. A name repeated across centuries. Slytherin. The page spoke of Salazar Slytherin as if he were myth, a founder who valued purity of magical heritage. Tom's eyes lingered on that phrase. Purity sounded like power with a pretty ribbon tied around it. He traced the branching lines that led from Slytherin down into lesser names. Some bright, some forgotten, until the ink finally reached Gaunt, cramped and ugly on the page, like a noble title written on a beggar's sleeve. Tom sat very still. It was one thing to be a wizard. It was another to be an heir. The library around him creaked and whispered, wood settling, pages shifting, candle flames shivering. Tom's heart beat slow, steady, as if his body understood that excitement was a waste. He read about a ring that had been in the Gaunt family for generations, described as bearing the Peverell coat of arms. He did not know what a Peverell was, but he liked the sound of it. It sounded like something that had survived. He read about a locket, too, once believed to have belonged to Slytherin himself. Tom's fingers tightened on the page, remembering the silver locket behind glass in Borgin and Berks, the Serpents gleaming like a promise. Coincidence, some part of him suggested. The small, cautious part that had learned the world liked to punish arrogance. Tom crushed that part without effort. Coincidence was for people who did not control their own stories. He shut the book with care and returned it to its shelf, as if returning a weapon to an armory. Then he left the library quietly, his mind moving faster than his feet. He knew the name of his mother's family. Now he wanted what the name had left behind. The castle spoke to him, not in words others could hear, not in the cheerful, chatty way ghosts spoke or portraits muttered. It spoke through the places most people ignored. The pipes behind walls, the drains beneath sinks, the hollow spaces where water ran and secrets followed. Tom first noticed it late one evening when he should have been in the common room. He had slipped out after curfew with the easy confidence of someone who assumed rules were for other people. The corridor was empty, the torches burning low, their flames pressed thin by drafts that smelled of lake water and ancient stone. As he passed a set of suits of armor, he heard it, a faint hiss, so soft it might have been imagined. He stopped. The hiss came again, and this time it was unmistakable. Not the wind, not the torches. Something alive, hidden. Tom's mouth went dry with a hunger he had never felt at the orphanage, where mysteries were petty and cruel. This was different. This was deep. He leaned toward the stone wall, ear close enough to feel the chill. The sound shifted, and within it was a pattern, a cadence, a language. Tom's lips parted. He had spoken to snakes at the orphanage once, without understanding how. A thin garden snake had slipped through the weeds behind the building, and Tom had looked at it and felt the words come out of him like breath. The snake had frozen, then turned its head, its tongue tasting the air as if startled to hear itself addressed. Now, in the corridor, Tom tried again. He let his voice drop, low and sibilant, shaping sounds that felt like instinct. The air seemed to tighten around the syllables. The hiss within the wall changed at once, quickened, answered, curious. Tom's skin prickled. He spoke again, and again the hidden presence responded, the exchange flowing with an eerie naturalness. He understood it, not with the slow work of translation, but as if meaning slid directly into his mind. Greetings, questions, irritation. Something old shifting in its sleep. The stone beneath Tom's palm seemed warmer now, as if the castle itself carried blood. He drew back, breathing slowly. The corridor remained empty. The torches continued to burn. Yet Tom felt, with absolute certainty, that he had just touched an artery beneath the skin of the place. He walked on, but he did not feel alone. He felt watched, not by teachers or prefects, but by something that waited, something that recognized him. He smiled to himself, the expression small and private. "I'm here," he whispered in that strange, serpent-soft tongue. In the wall, far beneath the castle, something stirred and listened. In potions, Tom's hands were steady. He liked the discipline of it, the way power could be coaxed from measured ingredients, the way mastery showed itself in the smallest detail. It was not like waving a wand and hoping. It was control, made visible. Slughorn prowled the dungeons like a well-fed cat, pausing by cauldrons to purr praise or swat mistakes. When he reached Tom's station, he stopped entirely. Tom's potion was clear where others were cloudy, its surface reflecting the torchlight like dark glass. The steam rising from it was thin and precise, like a held whisper. Slughorn's round face split into a delighted grin. "Marvelous," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Marvelous. I would have expected this from a third year perhaps, but not a first. Not a first, my boy." The other students stared. Tom kept his gaze on the cauldron, as if praise were irrelevant. He could feel their attention like heat on his skin. Slughorn leaned closer, dropping his voice. "You'll go far, Tom. Very far." Tom's expression did not change. "I intend to," he replied, and it was the closest he came to honesty. After class, Slughorn stopped him at the door. "Your mother," he said, and Tom felt the familiar tightening at the word. "Merop Gaunt. A sad story. Terrible, really. The Gaunts, well, they were once something, but they fell. Fell hard." "Why?" Tom asked. Slughorn's eyes flickered, deciding how much to give. "Pride," he said finally. "And poor choices." "Choices," Tom repeated softly, and thought of the orphanage children crying over lost toys. Poor choices were what weak people made because they did not know how to do better. Slughorn patted his shoulder with the hearty confidence of someone who assumed affection was welcome. Tom did not flinch, but his mind sharpened. If the Gaunts had fallen because of choices, then their heir would rise because of better ones. He left the dungeon corridors and climbed toward the higher floors, his thoughts moving like chess pieces. The Gaunt name, the locket behind glass, the ring described in genealogies, the voice in the walls that answered him like kin. Somewhere in the castle, Dumbledore was watching. Tom could feel it, a pressure at the edge of things. Let him watch, Tom thought. Watching was what people did when they were already losing. The restricted section was guarded by more than Madame Pince's suspicion. Chains bound certain books like prisoners. Some shelves seemed to repel the hand, making fingertips tingle with warning. Even the air felt different there, stale and heavy, as if soaked in old breaths. Tom did not enter it the way foolish boys entered forbidden places, giggling and shoving each other. He entered alone, late, when the library's vastness could swallow sound. He had learned the pattern of Madame Pince's steps. He had learned which floorboard squeaked, which torch flickered. He had learned the taste of risk and found it pleasing. His wand slid into his palm like a living thing. A faint light blossomed at its tip, muted, controlled. Tom moved between shelves as if he belonged there. In a way, he did. Knowledge belonged to those who could take it. He read titles without touching. Curses, necromancy, enchantments that sounded like prayers spoken backward. He did not choose randomly. He chose like someone selecting tools. A book bound in dark leather seemed to draw his gaze. Its spine was embossed with symbols that made his eyes ache if he stared too directly. Tom's fingertips hovered a breath away. Not yet, he told himself. Patience was power. He had learned that at the orphanage, where patience meant waiting until the matron's back was turned. He reached instead for a thinner volume, chained but less heavily, a compendium of old wizarding families. He traced the names until he found Gaunt again, the ink scabbed and ugly. There were notes scribbled in margins by some long-dead student. Mad, violent, dirty, degenerate. Tom's mouth tightened, not in shame but in anger. They wrote these things because the Gaunts had been poor, he thought. They wrote these things because they could, because no one stopped them. Tom would stop them, not by arguing, not by pleading, by making the world remember what the name could mean. He copied down details with a speed that would have impressed a teacher. A village name, Little Hangleton, mentioned in an aside, a reference to a shack, a note about an heirloom ring. Little Hangleton. The words sat on his tongue like an invitation. A faint sound made Tom freeze. Madame Pince's lantern glow appeared between shelves, moving slowly, searching. Tom extinguished his wand light with a thought and pressed himself into the shadow, breath slow. His heart remained steady. Fear was an indulgence. The lantern passed, drifting away. The library settled again into silence. Tom slipped the copied notes into his pocket like stolen gold. He left without a sound. He did not know yet how he would get to Little Hangleton, but he knew he would. He had learned the name of the place where his blood had lived and rotted. Now he wanted to see what remained. At Christmas, the orphanage tried to pretend it was a home. Someone put up a small tree in the hall, its branches thin, its needles shedding onto the floor like dead insects. Paper chains hung in loops. A few oranges appeared in bowls like miracles no one dared touch. The other children grew louder with the permission of holiday. They sang carols with cracked voices. They fought over sweets. They cried when letters did not come. Tom sat on the edge of the group, watching. The festivities were a performance he did not intend to join. Celebration was for people who were grateful for scraps. Mrs. Cole handed out small parcels from charities. Tom received a pair of socks and a worn book. He thanked her politely because politeness made adults relax. Later, when the dormitory quieted, Tom lay on his bed and listened to the wind. The notes he had copied at Hogwarts were folded in his pocket, close to his skin like a secret heartbeat. Little Hangleton. He had found it on a map in the orphanage's battered atlas, tracing the name with his fingertip until the paper smudged. A village in a county he had never seen, surrounded by fields and old money. It was not far enough to be unreachable. He thought of Dumbledore's warning about objects that fed on those who coveted them. Tom had smiled then, but now his mind returned to the locket behind glass, and the smile faded. If the locket was Slytherin's, then it was his. If the ring was his family's, then it was his. Hunger for what belonged to you was not weakness. It was justice. He turned the socks over in his hands, feeling the rough wool. He imagined stepping into the world beyond the orphanage walls, without asking permission. He imagined moving through the countryside like a shadow. He imagined knocking on a door in a village and saying a name that made people step back. Gaunt. Dot. The word was a key. He could feel it. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet. It tapped at the windows with insistence, as if urging him to move. Tom lay back, eyes open in the dark, and began to plan with the calm focus of someone arranging a murder. He would leave the orphanage after Boxing Day, when Mrs. Cole would be drunk on leftover cheer, and the staff, lazy with routine. He would take a little money from the petty cash tin. He would take his wand, hidden in his trunk. He would go to Little Hangleton, and there he would find what the world had tried to bury. The countryside was colder than London, a wide emptiness that made Tom feel both exposed and exhilarated. Fields stretched beneath a sky the color of old tin. Frost clung to hedgerows like lace. The road was muddy, rutted by cartwheels, and Tom's shoes were soon caked with brown. He walked anyway, steady, unhurried. People passed occasionally, farmers in rough coats, a milkman with red hands, a woman with a basket, but no one stopped a thin boy on a country road. Poor children were invisible everywhere. Tom preferred it. He had taken a train north with coins stolen from the orphanage tin, sitting stiffly among strangers and watching them glance past him. He had slipped off at a small station and followed signs, then instinct, then the pull of the name in his pocket. Little Hangleton appeared like a painting someone had forgotten to brighten. Cottages hunched against the cold smoke crawling from chimneys, a church spire stabbing up through bare branches. And above it all, on the hill, stood a large house, dark stone, many windows, iron gates. Even at a distance it looked like power. Tom stopped at the edge of the village and stared at the manor. A family lived there. A family with a name. He did not know their faces. He did not know their voices. Yet the sight of the house made something inside him tighten with anger so sharp it was almost clean. He was not going there. Not yet. He was not foolish. His father's blood was an irritation, but his mother's blood was the key. He had not come for muggles. He had come for what muggles had ruined. Tom turned away from the manor and followed a narrower lane that led downhill, away from the neat cottages, away from the church, into a wilder stretch where the hedges grew untrimmed and the trees leaned like conspirators. He walked until the village noise faded behind him. The air smelled of wet earth and decay. His fingers brushed the wand hidden in his sleeve, comforted by its presence. He found the shack at last, because it was the only thing that could have belonged to the name Gaunt in a world that hated it. It crouched in a small clearing like a wounded animal, half swallowed by brambles. The roof sagged. The windows were grimy. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Tom stood before it, breath slow, eyes bright. He had arrived. The shack smelled like rot and old magic, the kind that clung to walls the way mold clung to damp plaster. Tom stepped inside without hesitation. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a figure shifted in the corner, rising like something disturbed from a nest. A man, thin, filthy, with hair hanging in ropes around his face. His eyes were bright with feverish suspicion. In one hand he held a knife, the blade nicked and stained. In the other he held a bottle that reeked of something sharp and poisonous. Tom did not retreat. He simply looked at him. The man's gaze darted over Tom's clothes, his clean face. His nostrils flared as if smelling an intruder's blood. "Muggle," the man spat, voice thick. "You come to..." Tom spoke before the insult could settle. He let the serpent language slide out of him, low and sibilant, like a secret spoken through teeth. The effect was immediate. The man froze, knife held midair. His eyes widened, then narrowed. The suspicion shifted into something else. Astonishment, greed, fear. "Parselmouth," the man whispered in the same snake-soft sounds, almost reverent. You speak." Tom watched him carefully. "Who are you?" he asked, still in that language, because the man seemed more honest in it. The man puffed himself up, wobbling slightly as if drunk. "Morfin," he said, and spat again. "Morfin Gaunt, blood of Slytherin, blood of..." He waved his knife toward a filthy hearth as if the ancestors sat there. "And you? You're not from here. Your face is too clean." Tom's heart remained steady. "My mother," he said. "Merup." Morfin's expression twisted, contempt, and something like pain wrestling for dominance. "That weak thing," he hissed. That filth lover. Ran off. Shamed us. Fish." Tom's fingers curled. Weak. The word struck like a slap, not because it insulted Merup, but because it threatened Tom's new, precious idea of inheritance. "You had a sister," Tom said flatly. "She had a child." Morfin stared, then began to laugh. A harsh, barking sound. "A child," he jeered. "From a muggle? No." Tom stepped forward, and his wand slid into his hand. He did not raise it. He simply let Morfin see it, the threat implied. Morfin's laughter died in his throat. His eyes fixed on Tom's wand, then on Tom's face, searching. Tom spoke softly, still in Parseltongue because it felt right, because it felt like speaking from the deepest part of himself. "Look at me." Morfin's mouth opened, closed. He swallowed. Then, with a kind of reluctant awe, he said, "You've got his eyes, but you speak like us." Tom smiled, thin and controlled. "Show me what's mine." Morfin moved like an animal guarding a bone. He shuffled toward a corner where a rotted chest sat half buried beneath rags and broken crockery. He knelt, muttering in Parseltongue under his breath. and began to dig through the contents with frantic hands. Tom watched every motion. He listened not only to what Morfin said, but to what his body confessed. The twitch of paranoia, the possessive curl of fingers, the way his gaze darted to the door as if expecting the world to come claim what was hidden here. At last Morfin's hand emerged holding something that caught the firelight. A ring. It was heavy, old gold tarnished by grime. In its setting sat a black stone, glossy as wet ink. Around the stone, faintly visible beneath the dirt, was an etched symbol. Tom's breath did not hitch. His skin, however, prickled, as if his body recognized the object before his mind did. Morfin held it out grudgingly, like offering meat to a bigger predator. "My father's," he said. "Marvolo's blood ring." Tom did not reach for it at once. He let the moment stretch, savoring the power of making Morfin wait. "What is that mark?" Tom asked, pointing with a finger. "Not touching." Morfin squinted, then snarled. "Old," he said. "Peverell, don't matter. It's ours. It's proof." "Proof? Why?" Tom's eyes fixed on the ring until the world narrowed around it. He imagined it on his own hand. He imagined walking through Hogwarts with it hidden beneath his sleeve, a secret weight against his skin. He imagined showing it, one day, to someone important, Slughorn perhaps, and watching their face change. Morfin's gaze was sharp now, calculating. "If you're Merrips," he said, "then you're Heir," Tom supplied, and the word felt like stone. Morfin's mouth twisted. "She didn't deserve it. But you." His eyes flicked to Tom's wand, to Tom's calm. "You might." Tom reached out then and took the ring. The moment his fingers closed around it, the air seemed to shift. The shack's damp chill retreated a fraction, as if the old magic in the walls had recognized a rightful touch. The black stone caught the firelight and swallowed it. Tom slid the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Morfin watched, breathing hard, his knife forgotten for the moment. "You'll bring it back," he said, the demand shaky, uncertain. Tom looked at him and smiled. "I don't bring things back," he said, and there was no cruelty in his tone, only fact. Morfin's face contorted, rage rising. Tom lifted his wand just slightly. Morfin froze again, hate trapped behind fear. Tom turned toward the door, the ring heavy on his hand, the world suddenly rearranged. He stepped out into the winter air as if leaving a tomb. He did not return to the village. He did not want the manor on the hill. Not yet. Tom walked into the woods until the shack's stink of damp and madness was gone from his nostrils. The night tightened around him, cold and silent. The branches above were bare claws scratching at cloud. He found a hollow beneath a dead tree and built a small fire with stolen matches and dry twigs. The flames were weak at first, then steadied. He held his hands toward them, not for warmth. He barely noticed cold now, but to watch the way light moved over the ring. The gold caught the firelight and threw it back in dull gleams. The black stone drank the glow and kept it. Tom turned his hands slowly, studying the etched mark around the stone. A triangle, a circle, a line. It looked like a child's drawing. It felt like something that had survived war. Tom's mind went to the genealogies. Peverell. The name suggested old bones, old blood, old magic. The kind that lasted. He stared into the fire until the flames blurred. At some point, he never would have admitted to falling asleep. His eyelids lowered. The crackle of the fire became distant. The cold became irrelevant. And then the air changed. Tom's eyes opened in the half-dark. The fire had burned lower, but its light seemed oddly bright, as if reflecting off something pale nearby. A woman stood on the edge of the firelight. She was thin as hunger, hair hanging in dull ropes, a shawl wrapped around narrow shoulders. Her face was not beautiful. It was pinched by suffering, sharpened by years of being overlooked. Yet her eyes were familiar. Tom stared at her without fear. "Merip?" he said, and the name tasted like dust. She did not speak. Her mouth trembled, as if trying to form a word she had never been allowed to say. Her gaze dropped to the ring on Tom's finger, and something like longing crossed her features. Soft, pathetic. Tom felt a flicker of disgust, quick as a blink. Longing was weakness. She had died because she wanted. "You left it," Tom said quietly. "You left everything." Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something like apology. She lifted a hand, reaching toward him as if to touch his face. Tom did not move. The fire popped. A spark jumped. The woman's outline wavered. Tom's fingers closed around the ring. The black stone felt cold against his skin, colder than winter. He felt, in that coldness, a promise. Not of comfort, not of family, but of permanence. "Go away," Tom said. The woman's face tightened, pain flaring. And then she was gone, dissolving into smoke and shadow, leaving only the crackle of dying embers. Tom sat alone beneath the dead tree, staring at the ring. His expression remained calm, but inside him something settled with finality. If the dead could appear, then death itself was not a wall. It was a door. And doors, Tom knew, were meant to be opened. Tom returned to Hogwarts as if nothing had happened. He arrived back after Christmas with his trunk and his school books, his polite answers prepared. If anyone noticed the mud still clinging to his shoes, they said nothing. If any teacher wondered why his eyes looked sharper, older, no one spoke it aloud. He wore the ring beneath his sleeve, where the cuff hid it. The weight on his finger steadied him in a way that surprised even him. It was not comfort. It was anchoring. A reminder that he belonged to something that had existed before him, and could exist after. In the corridors, the castle's whispers seemed louder now. Pipes hissed softly behind stone. Water dripped in distant passages like a slow, impatient heartbeat. Tom caught snatches of Serpent's speech without even trying, the hidden presence responding to his nearness as if it sensed the ring, the blood, the claim. He spent evenings in the library, reading about symbols, about old legends, about death, and what people had tried to do about it. He learned to select books that could hide inside other books. He learned which students could be bribed to fetch something from a teacher's office. He learned which doors took longer to lock than others. In the Slytherin common room, he spoke more. He laughed a little. He let people think they were his friends. He noticed who watched him with admiration and who watched him with dislike. Both could be used. Slughorn grew more openly pleased, dropping comments about gifted boys and bright futures. Tom smiled and accepted the attention as if it were inevitable. It was. And Dumbledore. Tom felt Dumbledore's gaze like a chill in the air whenever they passed in corridors. The man did not stop him. He did not accuse him. He simply watched, eyes bright and measuring, as if waiting for the moment Tom would reveal the shape of his intent. One evening, Tom turned a corner and found Dumbledore standing at the end of the hall, alone. Torchlight flickered over the teacher's face, making him look older, sharper. They regarded each other. Tom did not lower his gaze. "Professor," he said politely. Dumbledore inclined his head. "Tom." For a moment, neither spoke. The corridor's silence filled with the distant murmur of pipes. Then Dumbledore's eyes flicked briefly to Tom's hand. So quickly another person might have missed it. But Tom saw. Tom always saw. Tom smiled, soft and controlled. "Is there something you want to ask me?" Dumbledore's expression stayed calm. "No," he said, voice mild. "Not yet." Tom's smile widened by a fraction. "Then good night." He walked past, unhurried, leaving Dumbledore behind him. But as Tom continued down the corridor, the ring hidden beneath his sleeve felt suddenly colder. He did not look back. He did not need to. He knew Dumbledore had understood something. And Tom understood, in return, that being watched did not mean being stopped. It meant being important. When the school year ended, The train carried Tom back to London, back to the soot and the iron and the smallness. Hogwarts fell behind him like a dream you refused to wake from, and the orphanage rose ahead like a punishment. Mrs. Cole greeted him with forced cheer. Tom returned it. He had become better at charm, better at looking harmless. Adults wanted to believe children could be managed. The other orphans asked him questions about magic, about the castle, about whether he'd learned spells to turn people into frogs. Tom answered with just enough truth to make them uneasy, and then he stopped answering at all. He spent his days reading, his nights thinking. The ring never left his finger. Sometimes he woke with the sensation of someone standing near his bed, a cold pressure in the air like a breath held too long. Once, he thought he heard a woman's faint sob, swallowed quickly by the building's creaks. He ignored it. The dead were irrelevant unless they could be useful. In late summer, when the heat made London smell of garbage and sweat, Tom slipped out into the orphanage garden after dark. It was not much of a garden, just a patch of weeds, a cracked stone wall, a rusted swing that groaned when the wind touched it. But it was quiet, and quiet was where thoughts sharpened. Moonlight washed the ground silver. Tom stood among the weeds and held his left hand up, letting the ring catch the light. The black stone gleamed like an eye. In his pocket he carried a scrap of paper folded and refolded, its creases worn. Letters. An arrangement of letters. Tom Marvolo Riddle. He had been turning them in his mind like a lock, searching for the combination that would open something new. He did not yet have the final shape. He was close. He could feel it. A movement near his shoe made him glance down. A small snake lay coiled in the shadow of the wall, its scales dull. Its head lifted slightly. It should have fled. It did not. Tom crouched slowly, the way a predator lowers itself not to appear threatening but to become inevitable. He spoke in Parseltongue, soft as breath over a blade. The snake's tongue flickered. It answered, a brief, cautious hiss that carried the simple questions of a creature that understood only hunger and fear. Tom's mouth curved. No, he murmured to it. You don't need to fear me. He extended one finger, and the snake slid closer, drawn by something it could not name. Tom watched it with quiet satisfaction. Even here, even in this muggle place of peeling paint and disappointment, he was not alone. His language existed. His blood existed. His claim existed. He straightened, looking up at the moon, at the indifferent sky. One day, he whispered, not to the snake, not to the night, but to the future itself, they'll say my name and mean it. The snake hissed again, almost approving. Tom slipped the scrap of paper back into his pocket and closed his hand around the ring, feeling the cold stone press into his skin like a vow. Behind him, his shadow stretched long across the weeds, tall and crowned by moonlight. Tom smiled into the dark, and the darkness did not smile back. It listened.